Slow Mesh, Week 5, John Reed, Jesse Simonton. Week 5 sounds crazy. We are over a month into the season. Teams are, over a third of the way done with their regular season. Things are starting to take shape a little bit, but there's still a lot more to learn, and we'll get some big answers this weekend. A jam-packed weekend in college football. What's up, Jesse?
What's up, man? I fumbled the bag last week. It should, after 3 games, should be better. My mic situation was screwed up, so we're gonna make sure that slow mesh handoff works properly this weekend. So
now
we've gotten in the reps. So
are you holding this microphone, or do you have a stand for it? What's it look like? Let me see it. Raise it up.
I'm holding it right now because I don't like my stand, so I got to get one of these nice ones that you got. So I have a little sitting stand, but I don't like that one. So I'm gonna get one of your nice arm stands here.
Sounds much better. So that's good. We're already making improvements as we're getting here into the meat of the beginning of conference play. The meat of the beginning that doesn't really make sense. That's kind of oxymoronic, but now we're getting to some good games is what I was trying to say. The heavyweight matchup that we've kind of been waiting all offseason for. Georgia, Alabama is here. Ole Miss, LSU. When you look at
teams aren't playing tissue paper anymore. That's what you're trying to say.
The tissue paper's gone. It is what I mean. There's no more off weeks until November. Even in the Big Ten, you got some gigantic matchups with Oregon and Penn State. Hell, even USC. Yeah. USC. I'm interested to see what they bring to the table. But before we move on to Week 5, let's hit Week 4. What stood out to you? What was the biggest thing, your biggest takeaway from the weekend?
Well, I wrote about this over at my the Substack, Surrender Cobra. I think that how could it not be the 3 teams, and they've done it differently, but the 3 teams in Texas Tech, Miami, and Indiana, and kind of how they have poured their resources into both their rosters and their coaching staffs. And this season, they've hit in spades. I know one of the questions you solicited that we got, I can kind of go ahead and jump in just on one of those before we even get to those much later in the show. But I think it was maybe Skoll or somebody asked about Texas Tech. Is this sustainable? Can this mercenary, philosophy of what they've done with their roster win, year over year? I don't know. And frankly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, right? I mean, what matters right now is this group of mercenaries that Joe McGuire's got seems to be playing team ball. Those dudes were swarming to the football. We've never seen Texas Tech play a defense like that. And they might have the backup quarterback might be better than the starter. At Miami, they've upgraded the defensive coordinator. They basically just play fast, violent, and physical. And so they have married this roster of 5 stars and some of the transfers they brought in, spending like crazy in the portal. Looks great, just fantastic defensively. And then obviously Indiana just completely annihilated Illinois to the point that Curt Cignetti, is just out here flexing all the guys that he brought with him from JMU, plus some of the newbies that he's got, including his $2 million quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, who a week ago we were talking about nobody in the NFL is going to be excited about this crop of quarterbacks. I think that's still probably true, but Mendoza has a chance to at least continue to kind of put his name on Front Street as hey, why can't I be a first-round pick?
In one game, he turned into the Heisman favorite, and now, a guy that might be the number 1 quarterback taken in the draft. Which, look, I mean, you go in, you drop 60 on Illinois. I don't care what their defense looked like. You go score 60 on a team like that, that's going to turn heads. Indiana felt like paper tigers last year, that they felt like they kind of just took advantage of a schedule that was set up perfectly for them. Doesn't really feel that way this year with them. Feels like they actually have some better bones and some better pieces to that team.
You know why that is? Because they actually have those offensive and defensive lines are actually Big Ten now.
Yeah.
Last year, I think they were a little ACC-ish, so they could get away with the schedule.
Right.
But now I think they really have guys on the offensive and defensive lines that are going to get drafted.
Yeah, Cignetti feels like, I think he's proven already wasn't just a 1-year flash in the pan. It seems like he is going to be an actual problem up there and actually turn them into a kind of a year in, year out, at least competitive team. This year, I don't know if they'll make it back to the playoff, but they're at least now on the list of teams vying for a position. They're at least on the list of teams that, has set themselves up to be in consideration. And I didn't expect that with them, before this past week against Illinois. I needed to see it to believe it. And they made a believer out of me. The schedule a little bit tougher. They do at least have 2 big road games this year. I don't know if they can win out otherwise and go 10-2, or even if they win a couple of those road games, but I was super impressed with them. The Texas Tech point, the Mercenaries, like, I know they were, really spending in the portal, but hell, they turned heads and made headlines for, going out and paying an offensive tackle recruit, what was it, $6 million or whatever it was to commit to Texas Tech. So it seems like they're throwing some of that money around at the recruiting level too. So I don't know if it'll just be mercenaries in the transfer portal as much as it is they're going to try to buy some recruits to go along with the transfer portal. I think everyone's very fascinated with Texas Tech and the way that they're just spending and how Brown is just throwing all that money out down there, trying to turn them into a new age have in the game of have versus have nots.
Well, the other important, I think, distinction with what Texas Tech is doing is that, and why I think they're a good example, and Miami this year too. Frankly, I think especially because you can compare it to Miami of years past, is that it's not just about spending money, because we can actually spin this into another direction of the takeaway from this past weekend of what's going on at Clemson, because it's not just about spending money. And you know this, John, it's about money well spent. It's about making sure the players that you got are actually worth the shekels that they're getting. Texas Tech seems to have hit on Bailey and Romello Height and the receivers that they've brought in. Obviously they brought in Joyner from USC. He gets hurt, and then they have these other backs that seem just as good. So they're hitting on these guys. Whereas Clemson, there's going to be a lot of talk about, Clemson hasn't brought in the portal guys and whatever. Well, Clemson's spending 85% of their football, or 85% of their revenue. That's $20 million checks everybody got. They're spending 85% on football. That is more than almost any other program or team in the country. Tennessee and some of these schools are having to, give money to Rick Barnes' basketball program. They're having to give money to John Calipari at Arkansas. Clemson's not doing that. That roster is bought and paid for similarly to Texas Tech. The difference is it seems like the coaching and the players that they have paid for at Clemson via the traditional high school recruiting maybe just aren't the right guys.
It's kind of wild because Clemson is pretty competitive at basketball. I mean, they've been pretty good in basketball, right, and the baseball program.
Made the Sweet 16, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say, was it the Elite Eight the year before, maybe?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think it was Elite Eight and Sweet 16, I'm pretty sure, but maybe they lost in that Sweet 16 game, and I'm confusing it. But either way, they've been good at basketball and good at baseball, too. So, it's kind of crazy that they have gone basically all in on football and still, not getting those results. I read what you wrote, and it was surprising seeing it broken down. Just their coaching problem, and you called it incestuous. And I hadn't really seen that talked about too much, but it makes perfect sense. Dabo's, keep it all in the family guy, wants Clemson Tigers there. When you look at that coaching staff, and was it 21 of 32 coaches or whatever the number was, have Clemson ties, either played there or have only coached there. That's crazy. And it kind of makes sense when you see just how outdated and how poorly coached they seem like they are. It's not like they're branching out and getting new ideas from anybody. It's like a cult mentality.
No, and you were on it from the beginning in terms of being skeptical about Cade Klubnik. I was dead wrong in terms of, I thought based on what he did a year ago, never have been sold on his, and I've said this before, I've never been sold on his NFL upside, but I thought he could be a very quality college quarterback and lead Clemson to a big season. Then you talk about all the NFL draft analysts, not just at ESPN, but the guys at PFF, the guys really everywhere. We're so talking about that Clemson had 4 or 5 first rounders. TJ Parker and the other defensive lineman, I'm blanking on his name right now, have just not been up to snuff. Terrell has struggled in the secondary. The offensive line was kind of considered mid to mad going into the season has just been bad. And so then it's like, if it's both an overrated, talented roster, but also a coaching staff that, as you just pointed out, that I put out there, 21 of 33, I think it was. So it's like 64%. I mean, it's not that those guys maybe individually aren't good coaches, but if it's just, a complete, it's just the same ideas over and over again. It's just, I mean, for all the nepotism jokes going out about Bruce Pearl and Bronny James right now, I mean, Clemson's got their own thing. Sweeney's got both of his kids on the roster, or both of his kids, on the coaching staff, and they're just two of those 21 coaches that are kind of the Tiger blood, which is just kind of remarkable.
Well, yeah, you gave me credit for Klubnik, and I will say I was skeptical, but I think if you'd asked me to break it down, like, it would have been like 80% my skepticism of Dabo and 20% on Klubnik. Like, I just didn't trust that Clemson coaching staff and didn't see the innovation, like, on offense. And that was without even knowing those numbers of what you're saying. It's just Dabo, to me, we went from clowning him and talking about him being this big failure and how the game had passed him by to all of a sudden that went away this offseason. And I was like, why? Because he beat SMU? Like, if he blew that SMU game, which they very easily could have, I think the conversation just would have been drastically different about Clemson. But, them surviving and hitting that 55-yard field goal, I think just completely put them in the driver's seat, which I found odd. And then, yeah, I mean, like, we've already seen the meltdowns from him, right?
Well, they got a lot of credit. What this is, and this will be a good lesson moving forward, because last year was the first 12-team playoff. Clemson got a lot of credit for playing pretty good. Again, just pretty good for 2.5 quarters against Texas.
They were down 21 in the fourth quarter, and we're like, they scored a couple touchdowns. Numbers look pretty good, and that got a lot of credit. That was my point. Was like, he threw 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, like when they were down 21. So, it feels, Gundy gets fired today, right before we start recording. It's not that bad for Dabo, honestly, but like, it does feel similar, just in the sense of like a legend that feels like he's overstayed a welcome, and then it's just going to keep kind of sliding. I don't think, don't get me wrong, that Dabo will ever get to the point where he's getting beat by 70 like Gundy was. I don't see it getting that gross, but I can't help but see the parallels between Gundy and Dabo, both kind of outspoken, thin-skinned people that can't take much criticism. Once that ball starts rolling, I don't know if either one of them had the what it takes to kind of push it back up the hill to stop it from falling. And Gundy got ran over. We'll see if Dabo's able to save it and if he'll evolve. But we're now in year 4, asking if Dabo is going to evolve, and he hasn't done it yet.
I mean, Gundy somehow escaped the posse the last couple of years too, and eventually the Cowboys were going to come home for the lead Cowboy there. I mean, this past weekend, 2 weeks ago, he's crying poor against Oregon and bitching about that, and then he literally loses to an in-state rival at home for the first time since 1951, and Tulsa happens to be the smallest and probably the lowest budget FBS team in the entire country. So, I mean, Gundy got the axe today. I think based on the results this past weekend, it's kind of win, not if, for Sam Pittman at Arkansas, win, not if, for Billy at Florida. I'm skeptical. I know he got a vote of confidence. I think it could get so bad and so untenable at Wisconsin that Fickell could also be out.
Lifeless.
So
I don't know what the buyout situation is there. I don't know if they have any money, but like,
it's close. It's $25 million. I put that. It would basically be a 33% Jimbo.
Okay.
Second highest of all time. So it would be expensive.
I was going to say, I think my producer on the radio said that Fickell had, I think he was talking about Fickell had the 3rd highest buyout in the country, is what he said. I don't know if that's true or what, but it seems like it's dead there. Like, once you get blown out at home by Maryland, it doesn't feel like there's any coming back from it. I do think it's kind of funny that we start this episode talking about Texas Tech and them buying themselves into relevancy on the same day that Gundy gets fired, just because, in another lifetime, T. Boone Pickens would still be alive, and he'd be spending all that money to make Oklahoma State a contender, and he'd be throwing around his money and trying to buy them into relevancy. But now he's gone, and now Oklahoma State's poor, and now Gundy's gone, and that program feels about as in bad of a shape as you can be in for a program that was top 10, top 15 for most of the last 10 years.
Of the three jobs available, how would you rank them right now? UCLA, Vatech, and Oklahoma State. Because I kind of have a pushback on the T Boone's picking deal, but I want to hear your three first.
Well, I was thinking about UCLA, Vatech. Oklahoma State just came open. Maybe you know more than I do about it. I don't view Oklahoma State as in being in a good position at all. UCLA, I read I think it was The Athletic that wrote the article just about how dysfunctional and kind of broke they are and how the money's just not there. So I think I'd have to go Vatech 1. I probably go, it's going to be weird, but Oklahoma State, UCLA, I mean, you live in Los Angeles, but you're like the 45th most important thing in Los Angeles. You ain't got any money. You're in the Big Ten, having to travel all across the country. You're not. I guess I'd go Oklahoma State 2, UCLA 3 is how I'd rank them.
Yeah, I would probably, based on, because I don't think if Vatech didn't get that check, or the promise of the check this a couple days ago, of that close to $50 million, I'm not sure if I would have put Vatech 1. I do think T. Boone's Pickens had a ton of money, and he did give it a lot of it to Mike Gundy. But I think that he and Mike Gundy might have felt fairly similar about maybe not wanting to pay players.
Sure,
a little.
Sure. Little plantation mentality. Okay, fair enough.
There's some old school mentality there that I'm not sure. But I will say this: the passion and fan base at Oklahoma State and Vatech. I make fun of Sandstorm and all that because it's like if it's so damn cool, they'd win more, in Blacksburg. But they've been losing a whole lot. But the stadium was full against Wofford after they fired their coach, and the stadium was full on a Friday night against Tulsa. Even though they're coming off getting drubbed by Oregon by 66 points. So the investment in terms of the fans are there. I think UCLA, even though it's in the Big Ten and eventually they'll get a bigger check out of that conference, I think that job has to be last. Because
it's dead last to me.
No one cares. A, no one cares. And B, you're already a broke boy. And then so you're going to have to overpay coaches to come to one of the most expensive places in America. You're $7 million to get to coach at UCLA doesn't go nearly as far as $7 million to coach at Arkansas.
And the writing's on the wall, and obviously we know how it's turned out, and we know what it says about them. But when your head coach leaves to go be an offensive coordinator, you know what I mean? Like when Chip Kelly said, "Hey, I'm out. I'm just going to go coordinate this Ohio State offense. Like I'm done with this. This isn't going anywhere." Like that, and then you have to hire, a running backs coach with no experience to be your head coach. Like that says all you need to know about UCLA. And then, like you said, the fan base isn't there. The NFL came to town, so now like whatever UCLA did have in terms of being football in Los Angeles, that's gone. It just gets knocked so far down the pecking order. They seem cooked.
They're going to hire a guy like Fitzgerald, who basically got he got a huge bag, from Northwestern for the way he was, ousted there, and for it to come out, whether he did or did not know, he won his lawsuit, and that's all. What matters is in the court of law for him. And so the fact that his resume's kind of been whitewashed or cleaned a little bit, I think he would be a natural fit there, coming from a school like Northwestern and being a coach that he can afford to live there, unlike a lot of other dudes.
I just don't know like the path forward in the Big Ten for them. Like it just feels like there's no chance for a rivalry or tradition unless it's USC. Nothing else is going to matter. And then just the 10th, 11th in that pecking order in the conference, whereas at least Vatech, you could see them maybe getting back up to like 4th or 5th in the conference. And Oklahoma State really has no excuse not to be able to compete in a Big 12 that seems like it should be wide open year in, year out. So that's how I would rank them. It's crazy. It feels like Vatech died in the Battle of Bristol. Like it feels like that was kind of the last hoorah for Vatech. It feels like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've missed a couple of years after that, but it feels like Vatech hasn't really been the same since Jawan Jennings and Josh Dobbs and them got them in 2016.
Yeah, and I think that was like Fuentes' first or second year. I mean, they've really outside of the Frank Beamer years, and really even the last 4 or 5 Frank Beamer years became, the 7-5s of Vatek. But outside of those, like, late 90s with Vic, basically from 99, I think, till, maybe it was a nice 10-year run. But other than that, that program has been nothing but of a little bit of kind of a bottom feeder. So
if you're Shane Beamer, are you listening to Vatek?
Well, we talked about that. I mean, the it could get late early.
That was
for
before
Shane
they lost
in
to
South
Missouri.
Carolina.
Yeah, that was before they lost to Missouri. Like going from playoff aspirations and all the assumptions, kind of like Clemson, of like, hey, you were so close last year. You're going to take this next step forward with your veteran quarterback. You're going to be one of those guys. And to now fast forward after a month and tell South Carolina, yeah, you've lost twice. You lost to Vandy and Missouri. So good job, Shane. That's not a recipe for success in the SEC.
And you still got Ole Miss. I mean A&M.
They have Ole Miss too. They have and Alabama. Yeah, I mean, like they got those three, and Oklahoma. I mean, like it is on the table that they go like 7-5 or 6-6, and that
they could have a sad trombone off with Clemson at the end of the year.
That could be brutal. All right. Anything else from week 4 you want to hit?
No, I think we covered it. I think we covered it pretty nicely. I had a bunch of fun stats I put up on my Substack on
Surrender Cobra. You can't forget the damn name of your Substack.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking. I was trying to remember how to say Jackson Sagapulatelli. Everyone's in love with this Cal quarterback. He's a fun lefty freshman. Boy, he took it on the chin on Saturday, 34-0 against San Diego State, with the most interesting stat to me being they opened the game on a 20-play drive, John. Everyone was asleep for this. I was asleep for this. I didn't stay up and watch it, but I watched it the next morning. 20-play drive. I think 11 of them went for like 3 yards or less, and they got stopped at the 2-yard line, and they scored 0 points the entire game. I mean, that's hard to pull off.
I had seen the hype train rolling for him. They were on my radar, and then when I checked the scores on Sunday morning, I saw they got shut out, and I said, well, so much for that. The hype train is derailed for the time being.
The algorithm went wrong there.
34-0 to San Diego State as 14-point favorites is pretty nasty.
There was some crazy. I mean, like 14-point favorites, they lose that. How in the hell was Wisconsin 10.5-point favorites against Maryland, even though Maryland had the better quarterback? The Clemson line, that was 17.5, and they had the better quarterback going into that game.
Yeah, it sucks from a Tennessee perspective because I was having visions of that Syracuse team, going 9-3 or so and being propped up as a pretty big quality win for Tennessee to handle them, neutral site by 20 points, and then all of a sudden Angeli's Achilles popped, and now that team looks like I think Fran Brown will still coach them up. And maybe they still get to a bowl game, but they don't seem like they got a much higher ceiling than like 6-6. Although I do still like their skill position players.
Yeah, Ricky. You know what Fran Brown thinks about Ricky White? The fact that he named him the starter in the spring, and then after watching him for 15 practices in the spring, he immediately went in the portal and said, "We need to go get peanut butter and jelly."
Is Fran Brown going to be in the mix for some of these jobs we're talking about, or is like Vatek? I mean, Vatek and UCLA and Oklahoma State doesn't really feel like an upgrade over Syracuse at this point, but I do think there'll still be some bigger jobs open. You talked about Arkansas. Florida feels like it's going to come open. Of course, Fran Brown used to coach at Georgia, so he's got some ties in the South. Do you see him being on any of those lists?
I could see him being on folks' radar. Fran's obviously a different cat. I mean, when he came out, he basically said he ain't gonna be no bitch this past week when talking about players, people stealing his players and whatnot. I mean, he's hilarious, but he's also Camden through and through. I mean, he's from Jersey. So he's right there. He's got a lot of guys on his staff that have ties to that area. He has already said, now we know Nick Saban said he's not going to leave the Dolphins, and then, left, a day later for Alabama. Coaches say hogwash all the time, but he has said that he, is not leaving Syracuse because they're school that gave him an opportunity. If Florida comes calling, that would be hard to say no to. I don't know if he would be, because of the type of coach that Billy Napier is. This is bad. I think this is honestly bad management, John, but we see it all the time. People want basically the exact opposite. Fran Brown isn't Billy Napier, but he is a similar sort of coach in that he is an organizer, a guy with the blueprint, a guy that is kind of a motivator, where Billy Napier, ironically, is also calling the plays, but he is not. No one is considering him an X's and O's offensive savant. And I think that's what Florida is going to want. That's why you're seeing Lane Kiffin be the number one kind of guy du jour for so many Gator fans. Eli Drinkowitz is going to be a candidate because he was sniffing around the gig a year ago. I really think I frankly think that Florida it would behoove Florida if they went and called Brent Key. And I wouldn't honestly be surprised, John, if Kirk Cignetti got a look.
Yeah, when we're talking about Cignetti at Indiana, he's at that age where it's kind of now or never. I don't know if he would jump into the pressure cooker. I don't know why you would. I mean, outside of a couple of $1 million, I feel like if you're,
and he's already getting 8.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's gonna be tough to make a whole lot more money. Your chances of winning a national championship would be better with the roster you could get at Florida, but also just you'd have to go there and start from scratch. And maybe your mentality doesn't work in the South. Maybe you don't have the same level or the same type of players or whatever that you've had at Indiana that you can get to buy in. So I don't know. That feels.
I don't know if it's going to be a start from scratch deal. I think the roster. Billy has recruited pretty well at the last 2 years. I think the coaching is the at paramount of the malpractice that's happening with Florida, and the fact that we've discussed it already, in previous episodes. But DJ Lagway is just not good, and I think he's hurt. To be fair, he's got a mental deal, but he's not good.
To be fair, I wasn't acting like the cupboard was bare at Florida because they got like a top 10 defense right now. But I just meant Cignetti seems like the ultimate culture, like my way type of thing, and he was able to bring that. He was able to bring the James Madison kids with him to Indiana and kind of put that in day one. I don't know if he could come in and take the kids that are already at Florida and get them to buy into that as easily. I think that was more so what I meant because there'll be talent on the roster at Florida. You talked about Lagway. I guess we'll end the Week 4 conversation with him. Heading into the week last week, I said I thought it was a 50-50 proposition that Miami was the last game of DJ Lagway's Florida career because you start looking at that red shirt and then you start maybe looking at the transfer portal. More of the same in the game. The offense struggles. They only score 7 points. Defense keeps them around, runs out of gas. They can't overcome the anemic offense. And then the reports come out yesterday. DJ Lagway in a walking boot. You talk about the injury over the last, basically 10 months he's been dealing with. Do you think that was the last game for DJ Lagway in the 2025 season? If you're him, are you shutting it down and just trying to get healthy?
He probably should. I think a red shirt would probably be in his best interests because, again, he just looks like a kid who is lacking confidence, but is also just lacking faith in his own body. And, he's too young to be breaking down with his shoulder, with the ankle, with the back stuff. He's been dealing with way too much already for a guy who has not played a ton of football. So he probably should, John. Based on what he said after the Miami loss, though, would lead you to believe that he still seems to think that he can save Billy Napier's job. So I don't know how this is going to play out. I mean, Florida obviously is not in any rush to fire Billy, mainly because they don't really have anybody on staff to hand the keys to. It's kind of a weird deal with Florida. Ron Roberts, the defensive coordinator, is doing a nice job as a defensive coordinator. I don't think they want Ron Roberts out there for the next 2.5 months or 2 months at the podium. And so there is kind of who would you hand the keys to? So if Lagway is still trying to save Billy's job, I could totally see him playing against Texas in 2 weeks.
If he's trying to save Billy's job, how about you score some touchdowns, DJ? You need to score if you want to save your coach's job. I understand you might be trying, but score, DJ.
Dan Rubenstein from the Solid Verbal, I thought, had the bar of last week when he said, for all the bad decisions DJ Lagway made against LSU, the worst decision he's made is maybe teaming up with Billy Napier.
I mean, it's true. I mean, and it's tough to come from Louisiana where you aren't coaching elite talent to then convince me and others that you're going to be able to develop that 5-star talent. Like that's not something you've really had to do. And with Lagway, it hasn't happened yet. Now, maybe it's partly on his body breaking down and him just being hurt, because I mean, that was a talking point all off season, was that, even I think 2 weeks before the season, Napier was asked if Lagway would be able to play if the season started today. And he's like, no, but the good news is we got 2 more weeks.
You know what else is, but you know what, but some of the stuff, it wasn't Bush League, it was Butch League stuff coming out of Gainesville during the summer and early in fall camp, where a lot of Florida folks, not just Billy Napier, folks in and around the football program were really pushing back on any sort of narrative that Lagway, that there was a problem with Lagway's shoulder, and they acted like it was a lot of like nothing to see here. And a lot of guys bought hook, line, and sinker into that, and who put out quarterback lists with like DJ Lagway, in the top 1, 2, or 3. And that was from guys at CBS to On3 to Yahoo. I mean, it was not just one individual. There was a lot of guys that were kind of buying into the idea that, well, I guess there was nothing to see here. He should be fine. And then lo and behold, look what happens when a guy doesn't throw a football for 8 months. I mean, he looks like a guy that hadn't thrown a football for 8 months.
Nothing to see here. The 2025 Florida offense. It does
Put
fit.
it on a tombstone.
It does fit. I got to get my shots in before November. All this could backfire in November if they somewhat figure it out, because the defense is still good. But yeah, those lists are weird because I kept seeing them with the All-American list, having Jermod McCoy on there as a preseason All-American, but it's like, hey, he might not play till the halfway point of the season. Like, are we really ranking him as an All-American? And all the season previews were talking about him as if he was going to be back, pretty much from the get-go. I think it's tough to cover this sport from a national angle and know all the intricacies of each program. It's tough. I don't envy the people that do it. So, all right, that's all I got for week 4. Let's move on to week 5. Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU. Which game is it more intriguing to you?
Well, I mean, Georgia, Alabama is going to be paramount. It's going to be number 1. I mean, that game had, for all the games that, and I think all the rightful guff that Kirby takes for not beating Alabama too many times, he's never played them in Athens. So they finally get him in Athens. Every other matchup's either been in Atlanta, a different neutral site, or in Tuscaloosa. So you get them at home. Kalen DeBoer clearly had Kirby on skates and that defense a year ago, with kind of blitzkrieging the Dogs out of the jump with kind of their scripted first couple series with Jalen Milroe. They hop out to that monster lead. Georgia roars back, and Ryan Williams makes, kind of one of the plays or catches of the year to kind of cement that win. Pretty much since then, the programs have kind of been, gone in, I don't want to say opposite directions, but Georgia has at least just kind of continued to just plug along, whereas Alabama's kind of had that, I think sometimes maybe there was something that got stuck in the carburetor, where it was like pucka, 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 and like, the car was like maybe backfiring a little bit. But they seem to have kind of gotten right, against Wisconsin, against, Kent State, or whoever else they've, beaten the hell out of. Ty Simpson looks good against these patsies. And so now Georgia's defense will face another kind of, aerial assault like they did against Tennessee. And we'll get to see what kind of Alabama has in store for a Georgia offense. It looked a lot more explosive 2 weeks ago, too.
Yeah, I got to say, whenever you start talking about how they've looked better against Kent State and Wisconsin, who we talked about being lifeless.
Exactly.
To me, that kind of takes the air out of the sail. I've been shocked.
I think it was Louisiana, but still, yeah.
Either way, point remains. The line movement in that game has been a little surprising. Just that Alabama has gone from 4.5 to 2.5. And I get that, they're a public team. People still buy into that name brand. They need it more after already having a loss. the Alabama owning Georgia narrative is out there too, despite, most of that, of course, being with Nick Saban and not Kalen DeBoer. But I don't know, man. I get that there's not a lot of reason to bet Georgia until you get closer to the game because the line, wasn't really in your favor there. But I'm surprised that so many people are picking Alabama and that they've forgotten the Florida State game. And maybe Florida State's not the 2-win team that they were the year before. Maybe Florida State is a legitimate top 10 team. Maybe they sucker punched Alabama. They rope-a-doped them, whatever, caught them sleeping. I'm just not buying Ty Simpson being able to go on the road and everything being okay. Like, I'm not willing to back him in Georgia. Maybe it's not a blowout like it felt like it was going to be after week 1 when they got mopped, the floor mopped with them by Florida State. But I just don't see them winning this game. Do you disagree?
No, I don't. And at night in Athens, Kirby has been unbelievable, and just winning games at home, for Georgia. That has become truly one of the more kind of raucous home environments in the country. Wasn't always that way, but it has been that way, for the last, I think, maybe 5 to 7 years. And then I think in terms of the granular kind of matchup aspect, Alabama's got to be able to run the ball, and they just really haven't. That offensive line has performed much better than they did against Florida State in terms of pass protection, in terms of Ty Simpson throwing on time. I love Gio Bernard, Ryan Williams. Again, the playmakers on the perimeter are exceptional. But with Jam Miller hobbled, and I do think he's apparently going to, be back close to full strength this weekend, we'll see if that Alabama ground game can get going. Because if you are one-dimensional against Georgia, I think they do have some pass rushers that can kind of get home a little bit. Tennessee, with that tempo, was able to mitigate it enough, even though Tennessee, I think, only averaged like 3 yards a carry. What is Alabama going to be able to do running kind of a more traditional offense that, that Georgia is a little more accustomed to? So curious about that matchup. Curious what we see from, Gunnar Stockton. He did it on the road in Knoxville. Now he's going to be at home. Are they going to kind of continue to kind of spread it out and get those playmakers involved? Because I think Georgia, they set it all off season, and it certainly seems like that they really believe they've hit on the Zachariah Branches and the Noah Thomases and Colby Youngs.
Maybe a dumb question, but who needs it more? Who's the game bigger to, Alabama or Georgia? Of course, Alabama already with a loss on their schedule, but Georgia, when you talk about, is it 1-9 in their last 10 against Alabama, 1-8 in their last 9 against Alabama, whatever the stat is, there's obviously some ownership going on there, and Georgia, kind of needs to prove themselves and kind of continue to try to take that title of standard of the SEC away from Alabama. Who's it bigger for?
Yeah. Hot take. I think both teams can afford a loss and get in the playoffs. But I do think that it is probably bigger for Alabama just because their schedule today, John, looks a lot harder than it did 3 weeks ago. I don't think a lot of folks before the season thought that Missouri was going to be this good. Oklahoma obviously looks a little saltier. So Alabama, I think, has more pitfalls. You obviously got to play LSU. You got to play, Auburn at the end of the year. So I would say Alabama just because the margin of error does, I think, it's not a tide right now, but it would shrink pretty small if you lose on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Georgia has the current
Tennessee, obviously, too. I mean, that's a huge game against Alabama, too. So
yeah, I think right now Georgia has the best win in the SEC. Would you agree with that? The win in Knoxville as being the best win in the SEC? Or would you LSU at Clemson, A&M at Notre Dame? Like, is there one that stands out that's better now?
I would say Georgia's win because I think Tennessee is a bona fide, top 12 to 15 teams, anywhere you could rank them somewhere and feel like that vote has legitimacy.
Yeah, Alabama could top that if they go into Georgia and win this weekend. So that one's going to be interesting. I really just don't buy Alabama still. I know they've looked better, but I I still don't buy it. I think Georgia's going to do what they do, which is win. It might be close. I could also see it being a blowout of just Ty Simpson completely going into his shell and that whole, hot streak coming to an end. I lean towards Georgia here for sure.
Well, and do the Alabama woes, because they've been playing the Patsies the last couple of weeks, it hasn't really been an issue, but all last season, and then obviously in the opener against Florida State, all the self-inflicted wounds, all the penalties, the dumb mishaps, with personal fouls and special teams gaffes and that kind of stuff. Does that come back into play for Alabama, on the road at night, in Athens? We'll see.
I said the same thing about Gunnar Stockton, in terms of him dinking and dunking and whatnot. And then he came into Knoxville and threw the ball on the field. I feel kind of the same about Ty Simpson. I thought against Florida State, he was doing a lot of dinking and dunking. He was very scared to push the ball down the field. Georgia has shown, at least Tennessee showed it, that you can beat them deep down the field. Maybe this is a chance for Simpson and, Ryan Williams and them to make some big plays if he's willing to sling it. I just don't know if he will be.
We'll see.
Missouri. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you brought up LSU, Ole Miss. That game is obviously that game has gotten a new layer of fascination. Whether it's who knows what's going on with Lane Kiffin and Lane Kiffin's daughter and Whit Weeks, the star LSU linebacker, but that's either a super troll by one side or a crazy maneuver by the other. I don't know what's going on there.
If
Lane's quarterback.
If you don't think that was coordinated by both sides, you don't know.
Lane Kiffin. Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, this would be so funny. Just announce it on game week. And then I'm going to tweet under everybody saying to take the over. Like, ha, ha, ha. Although I do wonder what the SEC's appetite is for Lane's gambling jokes. Like for him, to talk about that after the Kentucky game and then to, go on social media and start telling everybody to bet the over in the game. I do wonder how funny they actually think it is.
Well, especially with Lane's history of being a guy who seemingly has always known what the spread is, because the guy knows how to elicit some backdoor covers. If you've seen some Ole Miss games in the past where he's back there putting it on teams in the fourth quarter. I'm fascinated by what Lane does at quarterback, though. Does he go with? You
got to go at Chambliss. You got to go with him. Is that how you pronounce it? Trinidad Chambliss?
Trinidad. I think it's Chambliss. I think it's got that deep Southern. I mean, it's the biggest frat boy. It's the biggest frat boy name. It's just the ultimate Ole Miss rebel name, Trinidad Chambliss.
Well, give him the ball. I've seen enough of Austin Simmons. Give it to Trinidad and watch him cook.
But this goes to I agree, John. But this goes back. It's everything comes around to money. We talked about Texas Tech and Miami and all that earlier. What has Ole Miss invested in Austin Simmons, and how does that dictate decisions? Because we see this in the NFL all the time. The guy.
To me, that can't be a factor. It's not like you're making a decision, at the beginning of the season and you're worried about somebody transferring out, and you're having to go with an unknown or whatever. I know we've talked about that with quarterback battles before the season actually starts, but we're 5 games into the season now. You have a little bit of a proof of concept with Trinidad. If you upset Austin Simmons and he leaves his money on the table for next year, fine, man, go for it. We'll take your money and we'll give it to this quarterback that's actually throwing the ball around and moving our offense. I don't think you can worry about that. I think once you get into the season, you have to try to win games. It's completely different to me, roster turnover in college football versus in the NFL, where you have a franchise guy and you have to worry about 3, 4, 5, 6 years. For example, the Minnesota Vikings, they have to worry about J.J. McCarthy's ego, and they have to worry about J.J. McCarthy's future and how they handle that with Carson Wentz, who Carson Wentz is maybe better for the offense, and they actually look like a good offense. But hey, we spent this first-round pick on J.J. McCarthy. We got to babysit him. We got to treat him with kid gloves. In college football, if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm not worried about Austin Simmons down the road, because either he's not good enough to play, he transfers, he gives us back some of our money, or we're just paying him to sit on the bench, and then I got to pay this other guy. I got to come up with some other money for this other quarterback. I think it all works itself out.
I don't think you're wrong, but we'll see how it plays out.
So you think they're going to go with Simmons, or are you saying you would go with Simmons, or you just think that it's a tougher decision because of money?
I think it's a tougher decision because of not only money but just kind of locker room dynamics. If I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm rolling with Chambliss too. I'm seeing what this. I mean, he offers a dynamic with his legs that Simmons does not. He is a real running threat. I would put him out there, especially against Weeks and those LSU linebackers. I mean, they figured things out with Perkins. Weeks' brother is really good. I mean, the Tigers can run, and Blake Baker's going to come after him. And then if you go with Chambliss, and because he has we're not really poo-pooing Ty Simpson beating up on some Pats. He's looking really good. But Chambliss has taken advantage of playing a couple of awful defenses. I mean, Arkansas is terrible. Tulane's defense was not any good. And so he has certainly benefited from that. So I guess I would go with Chambliss, and then if you got to turn to Simmons, that's the way it goes. We'll see how Lane plays it.
Yeah, the last thing about it, when you talk about the locker room dynamics, so like that's why I think you go with the guy that's actually playing well and the guy you're winning with and the guy the offense has some confidence with. Like, if I'm in the locker room, I want to win. Like, the contract stuff's nice, but like all that's kind of settled. I don't want just the highest paid players to get the nod. I want the guys who are actually balling. That would be my mentality in the locker room, and I think that points to the backup keeping the job. Let's hit. Got to go with
the Sigma Chi president, man.
We got to hit some questions here before we get out of here. We already kind of hit UCLA or Vatech. Who's a better job? We already hit that. All right. Rank the 4 SEC teams based on 2025 on-field performance only. On-field performance only. Who are the top 4 SEC teams?
In no order, I would say, I guess, Georgia, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M.
Georgia, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M. Okay.
I think so. I certainly don't think Texas deserves any consideration for that. We'll see about Alabama this weekend. I think, obviously, Tennessee beating Syracuse the way it did, losing a coin flip game to Georgia could make a close argument. Would have them outside there, though. Obviously, LSU fans will be pissed that I didn't bring LSU. That I probably put Missouri over LSU there. But I think you can make the case that Vanderbilt has been just as impressive, if not more impressive, than LSU.
Yeah, I was going to say I think Vandy deserves a spot. Personally, I'm not as big on Texas A&M as you are. Their 3 wins. I mean, the win over Notre Dame was nice, but I didn't think they looked good against Texas, San Antonio, or Utah State. Really,
they didn't. But that Notre Dame game is a game that program never wins, John. And for
sure.
the way they won that game, I see your argument, but to me, Vandy could maybe deserve credit for being in the 4, but then I would still have A&M over like an LSU. I think what LSU did to Clemson, in hindsight, was just kind of meh. That offense, everyone thought Nuss and those receivers would be awesome this season. They have been, frankly, bad. The offensive line is not any good. I'm not really sure what's going on with that offense, but I do really like LSU's defense. So, but I think I would probably roll with the 4 that I named.
Okay. Yeah, we some of these wins are tough to rank. I think I'd have to put Oklahoma. Did you have Oklahoma in your top 4?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Oklahoma's got to be on there.
And they look better. And that win against Michigan, obviously Mateer got away with a couple interceptions in that game that the Wolverines dropped. But that win against Michigan, looks solid with the way the Wolverines, went into Nebraska and beat the Cornhuskers this past weekend.
You firmly buying this Missouri team? You feel, I mean, they're off to a 4-0 start. They handled South Carolina. They overcame a bad start against Kansas. They got UMass this upcoming weekend, so they should be 5-0 heading into their bye week. Are you buying them? Because the back half of the schedule is not that tough. You know, that schedule, we said set them up for success. They got, 1, 2, 4 ranked teams on it right now. Alabama, at Vandy, Texas A&M, and at Oklahoma. I mean, they'd be setting themselves up to only have to go really 2-0, or 2-2 in that 4-game stretch to be a playoff team. Are you buying them?
They're a sneaky playoff team because of A, the schedule, B, Ahmad Hardy at running back, and C, I think the offensive and defensive lines are pretty salty. They held South Carolina to -9 yards rushing this past weekend. Even if you take out sacks, I think the Gamecocks had fewer than 15 yards on like 20 carries or something like that. And they got a couple guys, and it's not just Hardy in the backfield. So I am buying them for being a team that, like you said, could go 10-2. They are absolutely the beneficiaries of one of the best schedules in the SEC, not only with who they have on it, but the fact that, hell, they don't have to leave Missouri until like the week before Halloween. I mean, they're at home for the first like 7 weeks of the season, which is kind of crazy. So I'm sort of buying them in terms of being, I think they are a legit top 20 team that has the schedule to say maybe they can sneak into that 12 by the end of the year.
That is crazy that they will be in the middle of October 18th, before they have to go on the road. That does seem wild.
I mean, that's anybody would sign up for that schedule in the SEC.
Last question on the way out. Do you think the SEC is in real danger of only getting 2 teams in the playoff? He says 5 Big Ten teams potentially could finish with 10 or more wins, and that it's likely that at least 2 ACC schools are getting in. No
chance.
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and say the SEC is getting at least 3. I'd be shocked at if they didn't get at least 3. Now, you know, the battle for 4, that's a different story, but 0 chance the SEC only gets 2 teams.
Well, and a lot of
3.
Well, and you know, those 5 Big Ten teams, a lot of them are going to start playing the merry-go-round where they play each other. Oregon and Penn State this weekend is going to be one of the best games. Then in 2 weeks, Oregon and Indiana play. Obviously, Ohio State and Penn State play later this season. Penn State and Indiana play later this season. So those guys are going to get some losses too. And you know, you're looking at the SEC only getting 2 in. One of the reasons I don't think there's no chance of that happening is that right before the season, we know, John, that they, you know, changed the metrics of the college football playoff, where basically they're saying who you beat, you know, the strength of schedule matters even more now. And that is a direct beneficiary for the SEC.
Yeah, last year it was about your quality of loss, and Tennessee fans were mad about the quality of losses they had not getting enough respect. And then this year they got a pretty good loss, but it's going to be about who you actually beat. So we'll see how it shakes out. Another week of data headed our way this weekend, going to be jam-packed.
What's your best bet?
What's your best bet? You know, I don't have one yet.
No?
I don't have one yet. Like, other than what I said already, like Georgia -2.5, I'm going to take Kirby at home, you know, laying less than a field goal. I just trust that. Like, I don't see them losing to Ty Simpson at home. Like, so many quarterbacks have came in there and died, and understand that not many of them have had the roster as talented as Alabama's roster, but I just can't get out of my head how poor they looked against Florida State, not only from a technique standpoint and a discipline standpoint, but just like hustle. Like, I think that team's got a lot of quit in them. And I think if they get punched in the mouth at Georgia, I worry about them being able to take that punch.
My last thoughts here. I like that. My last thoughts here. We'll find out more about A&M this weekend. Going to Auburn. That's a big game. You know, can Auburn get off the schneid after, you know, suffering a kind of a tough loss against Oklahoma? And then we didn't really talk Tennessee, Mississippi State, so I just want to get your brief, quick thought there. Who do you think's in more danger? Tennessee getting upset in Starkville, or Notre Dame getting surprised, by Woo Pig Sooie in Arkansas?
Well, I think Notre Dame's in much more danger just because their defense is so bad that, like, I don't know if
Chris
it travels.
Ass.
Yeah, and like Arkansas could score some points, and if Arkansas doesn't have back-breaking fumbles, they could be 4-0. It's the last stand for Arkansas, so I would say Notre Dame's in much more danger. Also, just because I think Tennessee. Look, I get the idea of being worried about their road woes, and that they kind of lay an egg on the road once a season. I just would be really, really, really surprised if it was at Mississippi State this year. I'd be really surprised.
Coming off the bye week was probably nice for them, basically. Or not a bye week, but I mean, it was a get right game against UAB.
You're able to kind of reset. If this would have been the week directly after Georgia, maybe you worry about that. But everyone should be feeling pretty good. Joey Aguilar is an adult. He should be able to handle the road. I know it's a big game at Mississippi State, but like it makes me feel good that like you can see that tickets online are still for like $80. They haven't even like necessarily. I don't think have officially sold it out in Starkville. So like, I still feel good about Tennessee's chances of going down there and winning. So I would say Arkansas much more likely to beat Notre Dame.
You heard it here first from John Reed. Not enough cowbells.
Not enough cowbells.
Or maybe too many cowbells. They got an excess of Cowboys if they got tickets available.
Don't take that as a challenge, Mississippi State fans. Just stay home. All right, Jesse, I'll talk to you next week. Tell everybody what you're working on over on Surrender Cobra.
Yeah, I got something cooking on. It was prescient, obviously, with this podcast right before we hopped on. Mike Gundy getting canned, but kind of looking at some of the hot seat coaching candidates and kind of what's going on there in terms of maybe what's wrong at Wisconsin, at Florida. I was kind of working on something with Oklahoma State too, but I'll scrap that and maybe move that a little bit forward. So yeah, come check out Surrender Cobra at Substack. You can find the link at Substack or in this, podcast feed, or at my Twitter at Jesse R.E. Simonton.
If you watch this, we appreciate
YouTube.
you on YouTube. Hit us with a like, hit us with a subscribe, comments. If you're listening, make sure you hit follow, leave some reviews, trying to grow it. Slow Mess wherever you get your podcasts. And then, of course, on YouTube if you're watching. All right, Jesse, talk to you next week.
Yeah, man. Good stuff, John.
See you, buddy.